So I don't know how well you can hear me or not. I got some dude sitting behind me though. There's Sean, there's Chase right there. But we are headed right now to Lincoln Tech University. We're about to go check it out. This is all for C9. So you guys are gonna come right along with me for the day. Hey everyone, I'm gonna see how it goes.
A stroke victim, and that looks like a woman.
If you shine me in the eyes with that phone,
There looks like a stroke victim and a woman.
I should have brought my big speaker.
They've been doing this for the past like 15 minutes. They've been sitting there face walking with everyone on the bus.
It's the button on the bottom of your armrest.
Been on the bus for a solid 5 minutes and I already want to kill everyone on it. And then there's Sean. I like Sean. Sean's cool.
Nope, it's fucked up.
Oh shit, we gotta get it.
Mine only goes forward.
We're about like 60% of the way there, I think. I don't even know where we're at. We're on the highway. We're almost there, hopefully. I hate everybody on this bus. I'm joking. There are people at the front door waiting for us. They're waving to us. They're not waving to Sean. They don't like Pittsburgh fans.
I saw you, Chance. I heard you.
Fucking gay,
Hey, Sean, what's your service?
We're here. Fuck Jordan. Yeah. I'm gonna run up here when we come back. I can fit. Look at this. It's like all the way down there.
What's up, Josh?
What's up, Josh? What's up, Josh? How you doing?
Doing good, I'm tired. I want to go home already.
Why?
No school. No school. I'm fucking doing this for hours now. I want to put my arm around you. How about that?
Bethany's gonna get jealous, man.
What's that?
I said Beth's gonna get jealous.
Dad.
Dad.
Dad's gonna get jealous.
Dad. There's Dad. Dad.
Look at my dad.
Dab. Oh my god. Dab. No, dab.
Just do a mini like
Dad.
do mini finger dabs. So it's just like.
I already have glasses on and they're gonna give me safety glasses to wear. I don't like this. Thank you. I gotta take these glasses off and put on some safety glasses. I don't like this idea. I gotta put on safety glasses. Making us put on safety glasses, right?
Good game.
Can you stop spanking me?
But I already had glasses to begin with.
Yep, prescription glasses. We don't
I'm not tough. You're not tough. I'm like a baby.
This is much better.
I'll come through the
Let's do this.
Can you stop taking videos?
No.
Such an idiot.
on the generation. Look at me, picture that.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Can you hold it? Moved on to the next part of the tour. We're on like collision repair, I believe now. There's a sick car I want to go see over there, man. We're going to do it.
So guys, this is obviously we just looked to see
Cool
the
stuff.
other
I got valet. They parked my car right up
Yeah,
here.
they parked our car right over here, guys. Check this out.
That's what technicians that already out in the field, they're going to come here if they wish to see end up training. As a student here, as a student in the collision program, we got to learn about basically just kind of what we got to work on based on what may be gained in a common rep. That's a Dodge Dakota that Rich Evans came to an event, same event where we were donated the welder a couple years ago in April. Rich Evans, he's the number 2 collision guy in the nation. He came here, set up a booth. This is one of these paint booths that he painted. He allowed some of our students to help him paint. So he basically did that entire car in about 6 or 7 hours. It's amazing. This is a
Not really a truck guy, but I think we can both agree that you take that in a heartbeat.
Oh, heck yeah.
ordered and installed. Got the pistol grip shift up there.
That's awesome.
Isn't that cool? I'm telling you, I haven't met one person to walk by this car. Yeah.
Back on the bus. Part 1 of the tour is over. We're moving on to part 2.
Oh, he got you. Shit, this part 2.
Part 2.
Oh my.
Are we getting food?
No, she said we have to wait.
You're doing great.
I died with the heavy.
I think I
Oh hell.
think I did. Not entirely sure yet.
I went to heaven. It's in my
Lincoln.
Just got done with a bunch of like motor stuff, talking about all of it. So yeah, look at that.
They can't see.
So much has been going on so far. I wasn't able to record a lot of it. I actually fell asleep in the middle of one of the lessons that dude was giving. Honestly, yeah, I was. So we're about to eat lunch, like pizza or something.
I think it is pizza.
Mulligan said like wheat and pizza or something. Don't know where it's from, doesn't matter, it's food. I'm starving, I haven't eaten since like 11 o'clock last night, so I'm a little on the starving side right now. But I think the next clip you guys might see might be us at McDonald's after this whole trip, and I'm going to talk about just basically what will happen after this. So cue the scene. Alright, so we're not going to hit a McDonald's after all. We ended up eating like 8 or 9 pieces of pizza, I think it was.
We ate like 20 pizzas.
Oh yeah, they ordered like hella ton of pizza. Anyways, if you guys like the video, please be sure to like the video. Obviously, comment, be sure to subscribe if you're new. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, links in the description below. Live stream later tonight. Come join me, League Mansion, and we got UMGs later. And as always, this is your boy Azrael, signing off. Peace out.